The holy month of Ramadan is upon us. Today we'll be discussing the matters related to this spiritually charged month. Join us on Beacon of Truth.
इस्लाम कुछ भी हो जाएंगे हम जहाँ भी के जाना पड़े हमें जाएंगे हम जहाँ भी के जाना पड़े हमें.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Beacon of Truth, a live program from MTA International Canada Studios. In this program, we discuss a variety of contemporary issues relevant to today's young Muslims. To help analyze these subjects, we get the views and the expertise of some of our guests as well as the general public. You too can get in touch with us with comments and questions. You can send us your questions via Twitter and Instagram using the hashtag BeaconMTA. We're conducting an online poll today. Today's topic is Ramadan. So on social media, we ask you, what is your motivation for fasting? The options were whether it is a health-related cause or because it is part of your faith or your culture, and an option as well that you are not motivated to fast. Inshallah, we'll share the results later in our program. Today, I am joined by my two colleagues, Rizwan Muhammad Sahib and Sadiq Ahmed Sahib, both of whom are serving as imams and as missionaries of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community here in Canada. Now, Ramadan is the holy month of fasting for the Muslims. And in this month, the Muslims all over the world, they refrain from food and drink from sunrise to sunset. And this is all done in an effort to establish a stronger connection with our Creator. Today, we'll be talking about the forms of fasting found in some religions. And if all religions have taught some form of fasting, there must be some great spiritual as well as physical benefits in this exercise. We'll be discussing all of these things today. But first, let's find out what some people in the public understand about the concept of fasting.
Well, I know in many religions they do fast. For example, Muslims have their Ramadan. In Christianity, they also fast. And that's when they want to receive an answer from God and for God to speak to them in a different manner. We do fasting maybe a little bit different than the Muslims. We would pray continuously and we would not eat food in general. I know in Ramadan you would eat after sundown, and so in Christian way we would not eat for maybe 3 days, for maybe 2 days, and wait for God to respond in prayer or just as a revelation.
Well, in our religion, basically we do fasting as well, and it's really good to kind of like interact, like connect spiritually when you're fasting, like you're focused on your spiritual relationship with your God, and it's very like giving you this inner peace. Like when you do fasting, you're like focused on your relationship, your connection with God.
I think when we put ourselves in a position of less privileged people, it makes us connect more to our spirituality or inner self, because that time we didn't have all these distractions that we normally have during when we were not fasting. So being in that state of purity of fasting with your mind and your eyes and your mouth and everything, it gives us more connectedness with our God and with our own spirituality.
Let's get right into our discussion today about fasting. Let's start with a little general discussion, first talking about perhaps the reasons for which people fast.
Well, the obligation of fasting is found in the Holy Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah. Allah Ta'ala says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, that Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, kutiba alaykumus siyamu, kama kutiba alal ladhina min qablikum, la'allakum tattaqun. And the translation is that, O ye who believe, fasting is prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, so that you may become righteous. So we see that there are three aspects, main aspects in this verse of the Holy Quran. The first part is that fasting is prescribed for you. So the word in Arabic which is used is kutiba, which means that it has been made mandatory upon you. And the fasting made mandatory upon you is in the month of Ramadan. So it's not talking about any other part of the year, but in the month of Ramadan, it's mandatory upon you. So it's not something which is optional. Sometimes people think that they can fast or maybe they don't need to fast. But in the month of Ramadan, if you have attained the age of maturity and there are no excuses, then you should be fasting. Also, we find in the second part of the verse, Allah Ta'ala says that kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum, that as it was prescribed for those before you. So this shows that Islam isn't the first religion in which fasting was prescribed. But when we look at the main religions before Islam, we can see that Allah Ta'ala also told those followers of those religions that they should also fast. When we look at Judaism, Christianity, Hinduism, we find some sort of fasting within those religions as well, even though they might differ in to what extent or how they fast. Then we find that all these things, it basically shows that fasting has a link with spirituality. So in order to increase one's spirituality and in order to gain those high levels of spirituality, it's quite important that we fast. And this is why Islam has also made it a basic foundation in the teachings of Islam, that fasting every single year is part of, or it's mandatory as well. And as we can see that, in a building, there's a foundation. And if those pillars are not followed or they're not made properly, then the foundation, it collapses. So in the same way, in the foundation of spirituality in Islam, one of those key foundation or pillars is fasting as well. And in the last part of the verse, we find that Allah Ta'ala gives us the purpose of fasting. And He tells us that the main purpose why you should fast is so that you may become righteous. So we can see that even the actual word of Ramadan, it comes from the root Ramada, and the meaning of Ramada is scorching heat. And this basically implies that it burns away sin or the desire for sin.
And Sadiq Saab, staying hungry for a period of time, this is something in many major religions of the world. So how does this help in creating that spirituality or creating that deeper connection with God?
Right, Anand Sahib, this is the beauty of the teachings of Islam. When Allah the Almighty gives us a commandment, He also explains the wisdom behind it. When we look at the various commandments which are found in the Holy Quran, the purpose of these commandments, or the essence of all these commandments, is to increase in our spirituality, is to become more righteous, is to connect with Allah the Almighty. So the same goes for fasting, as Rizwan Sahib has mentioned the verse in which fasting is prescribed. Allah Ta'ala mentions at the end why it has been prescribed, and that is لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that you may become righteous. Now one would ask, how do you become righteous? How do you attain Allah the Almighty through fasting? This reminds me of a story narrated by Sayyidina Hazrat Muslim Maud Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu. Huzur mentions that once there was a saint, a teacher, and he had a student who had been studying under his care for quite some time. After the student had finished his studies, he was about to go back home. Upon this, the teacher, in order to see if he has actually learned something, in order to test his knowledge, he asked him a question. And he said that in the place where you are going, is there also Satan there? And the student replied, yes, Satan is everywhere. And the saint asked that, okay, imagine that you turn to God, you try to establish a relationship with God through various teachings, various methods. But Satan comes in your way, he stands in your way, he tries to misguide you, he tries to lead you astray through various means. What would you do? And he said that I would fight him off, fend off his attacks. The saint says, let's say you become successful in doing it, but again you turn to God and Satan comes back again and tries to mislead you once again. What would you do then? And he gave the same answer, that I would fend off his attacks. The saint says, now for the third time, you turn to God, but there he is again, trying to misguide you, trying to lead you astray. What would you do? So when he asked him for the third time, the student, he became a bit agitated. And he said that, what choice do I have? I will continue in fighting off Satan so that I could get to God. And the saint said that if you keep on fighting Satan all your life, when will you be able to reach God? At this, the student, he became a bit quiet. He started thinking about it. The saint then says, let me give you another example. Now imagine that you go and visit your friend, but this friend of yours, he has a dog in his front yard. And when you go for his door, the dog attacks you. What would you do? The student says that I would fight the dog. I would, guide him away, send him away. He says, okay, you become successful and the dog leaves. But as soon as you turn around and try to knock on the door again, the dog comes back and tries to attack you again. What would you do? Again, he gave the same answer. I would send the dog away. He says, now for the third time, you are about to knock on the door and the dog comes back and attacks you. What would you do then? He said that at this point, I will call on to my friend who is inside. I would tell him to come out, take care of your dog. I'm trying to get to you, but your dog is not letting me get to you. So this is the essence of fasting. Fasting, according to the teachings of the Holy Quran, leads to taqwa. And taqwa, in essence, is God consciousness. Taqwa, a person who has taqwa becomes more conscious of God. He becomes aware of God. And this month of Ramadan, fasting, it gives us this very opportunity that we are able to call unto God. We should call unto God to fend off the attacks of Satan. And we should seek his help and we should seek his mercy.
Jazakumullah. Earlier I mentioned that the viewers can get in touch with us with comments and questions, and you can send us via Twitter and Instagram using the hashtag BeaconMTA. This was also a question that we asked some of our viewers, and the question is, how do you think fasting helps us in improving our spirituality? This first comment comes from Krishan Ahmed Sahib. He says that personally, fasting helps us in becoming aware of the everyday abundance of blessings provided by Allah, being more thankful and more praiseful of His mercy and graciousness. Another comment from Dania Chaudhry Sahiba, she says that the time of Ramadan is so special that it always comes around when someone is in deep need of God and the right path. And thus praying 5 times a day as well as reading the Quran and fasting all come together to help one receive the help they need. Sitara Jat Sahiba, she comments that we actively engage in doing good deeds, reminding ourselves consciously that the blessings of fast are wholly attained when we urge to do good for the sake of Allah, and the sole purpose of Ramadan and fasting and fasting in that month revolves around those conditions of goodness of heart and soul. Uzma Noreen Saiba, her comment is that fasting gives you empathy for humanity and you try to serve humanity. Offering nawafil and reciting the Quran gives you a chance to reflect on yourself, and by doing these things it becomes a habit, and so we do it more than we used to, and by doing these things it improves our spirituality. And I'll take one last comment. This is from Waqar Ahmed Sahib. He says that restraining ourselves from worldly gratifications or comforts enables us to channel our attention to our spiritual well-being and become immersed in a routine and habits that primarily nourish our soul. Jazakallah to our viewers who have sent us their comments, and inshallah towards the end of our program we will have time for a few questions as well. So far we've discussed that fasting is not just a novel practice introduced by Islam. Some form of fasting is found in almost every major religion. And as we have just discussed, in Islam, the practice of fasting is not only a physical exercise, but a spiritual one, the ultimate aim of which is the attainment of God's pleasure through that regulation of one's own life. But fasting is not only a means of increasing in one's spirituality. In many recent health studies, the subject of fasting has been taken up to prove, in fact, the outstanding physical health benefits of fasting as well. Let's listen to what some people think and know about the health benefits of fasting.
In North America, we tend to eat a lot. Our mouth is never says one coffee, this, that. Throughout the day, we eat a lot of things. And most times, those things are not really nutritious or beneficial to our body. But because during this time, we are keeping from eating and resting our bowels, it allows our systems to cleanse out itself. And then when we are doing the iftar, we tend to use some food classes that are beneficial to us, like fruits and all that. That helps us to cleanse out our systems.
Many studies prove that fasting improves your blood circulation. Yes, and it's a natural detox to your stomach and intestines and all.
Maybe you're moving away from other bad habits you used to have, like health-wise. Like maybe when you take a step back from it, because every day when we're outside, we like to buy junk food, or like we just buy whatever's convenient and whatever's around. So maybe during Ramadan, you start to take a step back. You're like, listen, like what am I actually putting into my body? Like maybe I should like change my lifestyle. It's a month. You know, you can make better health choices with your afur whatever you eat, and just try to take that and also develop, because it takes like 21 days or something to develop a habit or something. So if you just like start eating healthy whenever you afur.
Like physical reasons, like nutrition, yeah, I do fast. So that whole motion of like breakfast is the most important. I don't necessarily believe that. I believe whenever you wake up and whenever you feel though you should eat, I believe that's when's the right time. So yeah, usually I fast, because usually I will eat about maybe at noon, around 1, and then I'll eat up until maybe 8, 9:30 at night, and then I won't eat until, like I said, noon the next day. So it'll be about a 14-hour fast, I would say.
Nowadays, it seems like everywhere we see, the great health benefits related to fasting. So, Sadiq Saif, if you could tell us a little bit more in detail about fasting and how it helps in health.
Right. Fasting is now medically proven to be a very healthy act. We have heard some of the comments where people are trying to improve their lifestyle and their health through fasting. In recent years, we have also come across various studies. One study, for example, shows that when there is nutrition deprivation, that's when cell rebuilding is at its peak, at its highest. And this takes place when a person is fasting. And then we also keep hearing about intermittent fasting. A lot of athletes are using this method in order to improve their physical form, in order to become better at what they do. So such studies are being carried out now, but if we look at the beautiful teachings of Islam, Allah the Almighty had informed us in the Holy Quran. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Allah the Almighty says, وَأَن تَصُومُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. That fasting is good for you, if you only knew. So Allah the Almighty had informed us that fasting is good for us. It's good for us in the spiritual sense, as well as it carries a lot of health benefits, which are now being proven through various studies. I have also come across some studies which show that some doctors have developed a system of health through fasting, an exclusive use of fasting. So now doctors are using this, and a lot of people, as I mentioned, are using fasting as a tool to enhance their physical form. If they are encountered with various ailments, there are forms of fasting that people can do in order to overcome those ailments.
And since we're talking about fasting and its relation to health, so we asked a doctor, this is Dr. Nazia Nigat, and she's a family physician. We asked her regarding some of the proven health benefits. Let's hear what she had to say.
Fasting is the best way to heal and cure the disease. Healing is a biological process, and our body inherits this ability to cure itself, and fasting is usually the initiative or is the initial starting point. So the physiology of the fasting is very fascinating. The power of fasting does not just lie in mere decrease in the calorie intake, but the most benefit comes from the hormonal changes. So when we fast, the benefit comes from the decrease in the insulin and increase in the cortisol and the growth hormone. So when we say that fasting helps in cure and healing our body, how does it do that? So fasting does it by doing two good things to our body. First is autophagy. In 2016, a Japanese scientist, Yoshinori Isuhumu, has been awarded by a Nobel Prize regarding his discoveries in the mechanism of autophagy. Autophagy means that eating oneself. Our body has this mechanism that through which it tries to get rid of the old, worn off, and damaged cell machinery. And nutrition deprivation is the key activator of this process. So when we fast, our insulin goes down and our glucagon goes up. And increase in this glucagon is the stimulator of autophagy. And fasting is the greatest known boost to this process. So once our body is able to get rid of these old cells, and then fasting does a second good thing to our body by increasing the growth hormone. Growth hormone tells our body to make new body parts and make new cells for our body. So it means that we can say that through fasting, our body goes through this whole new renovation. Fasting has very good health impacts on our body. It increases our concentration, it prevents the Alzheimer's disease, it prevents the insulin resistance, it can even reverse the aging process. Diabetes has this unique malignant potential to devastate our body by involving certain organs of our body. It is the leading cause of the blindness, renal failure, nerve damage, amputations, stroke.
So those were just some of the benefits of fasting, which the latest studies have proven. So now, Sadiq Saab, another very important aspect of fasting is in regards to the regulation of a schedule and how it helps in maintaining that. And of course, that's very important when it comes to advancing in anything. So if you could shed some light upon that as well.
Right. You know, in order to gain anything in life, we have to make an effort on our part. We have to make some sacrifices. We have just heard from a physician, in order to become a doctor, you have to go through a number of years of very difficult studying, and you have to make a lot of effort, you have to make sacrifices. You know, as the saying goes, no pain, no gain, right? If you do not put yourself into difficulty, you would not be able to gain anything. We look at the example of athletes. They put themselves through very hard training, physical training, in order to improve, in order to rise above everyone else. For example, look at lives of some various successful people in the worldly sense. One of the things that is most common amongst most successful people is that they wake up really early in the morning. You know, they are early risers. Everyone else is sleeping, but they are awake and they get things done, right? So they're sacrificing their sleep. So in order to gain anything in this life, we have to make sacrifice. And the same goes for the spiritual world. If we want to increase in our righteousness, if we want to become more spiritual, we have to sacrifice. So if the worldly people can do it, then we as religious people, those people who have various commandments, should also try to strive in this.
I think it's just about changing one's mindset. For example, if we need to go to work in the morning, we would even wake up at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., or if we're going to school and we have a lecture in the morning, we would wake up at 8 a.m. So why can't we, in the month of Ramadan, wake up for tahajjud, eat suhoor, and also offer the Fajr prayer? So it's just about changing that mindset and making our bodies adjust to that, the aspect of it.
And apart from, the physical health benefits, we know that fasting also has a great deal of positive mental health benefits as well, especially because we're talking about building those good habits, and this is a time period in which that can definitely happen. So how does fasting help in that regard?
So there was a doctor, a plastic surgeon in the 1950s. His name was Dr. Marshall Maltz. And he basically noticed that it would take a minimum of about 21 days for a patient to get used to any alteration or any change in their body. So for example, if a patient had a nose job, or even if one part of the body, a limb, was amputated, so the mind would take at least a minimum of 21 days for it to adjust and to actually acknowledge the fact that that limb has been changed or is missing. So in the same way, when we look at the month of Ramadan, we can see that this is basically a good month or a good tool to change our habits as well. Because we have that whole 30 days, so we can change whatever habits that we want. And not only we can gain any, we can gain any new habits as well, but also we can see that Ramadan is the month in which we can control our nafs-e amara as well. the one that incites towards evil. So any bad habits that we want to get rid of, we should try to focus on those bad habits and try to get rid of them in the month of Ramadan.
And in this way, it's a continuous progress, because every next Ramadan, you're taking it from the place where you left off.
Exactly.
And you're always improving and getting rid of your bad habits. Jazakallah. We have time now for a few more comments that have come in from some of our viewers. We asked on Twitter that what are some difficulties that you face while fasting? This comment comes from Nayab Khan Sahiba. She says that there are difficulties depending on which season the Ramadan begins. Like not drinking during the summer season, the duration of the fast is longer than in winter season. And she says, but the Holy Quran says, surely there is ease after hardships. So inshallah, Allah the Almighty will help us. And we asked that if you were educated about fasting, would you be more inclined to try it? So this comment comes from Samira Sahiba. She says that I think if anyone knew not only about the spiritual and physical benefits of fasting, but even the motivation behind why Muslims fast, they would definitely want to try it out. I know some non-Muslims who fast during Ramadan just because they love the motivation behind it. So now, Sadiq Saab, there is this one question, of course, the challenges that we face in this month of Ramadan, especially when it comes to some of our youngsters and the youth, perhaps who have this idea that it's an optional thing, it is not an obligation. As we've already talked about, that Allah says, Kutiba alaykum, that it is enjoined upon the believers. So if you could tell us some of those and any other issues being faced by the youth.
Right, so first of all, as you mentioned, it is an obligation, it's not an option. But we face various challenges living in the society, and some of our youth, they find it very difficult to fast in the month of Ramadan. And one reason for that is that, living here in the West, we have become accustomed to a very comfortable, very luxurious lifestyle, and everything is readily available to us. And so, of course, for a person who has these kind of comforts, it would be difficult to fast. But it is the teaching of Islam, it is a commandment of Allah the Almighty. So we must all strive to overcome these difficulties and try to act upon this commandment. Sometimes people come up with small, petty excuses in order to avoid fasting. But we should also be aware of the fact that Allah the Almighty is well aware of our intentions. Allah knows if our excuses are valid or they are just made up. So if we come up with small excuses just to avoid fasting, then we are the ones who would be depriving ourselves from all the benefits which are associated with fasting. And the same principle applies that if we want to increase in our spirituality, again, we have to make sacrifices. And this is one sacrifice. Of course, you are used to having food, eating, drinking throughout the year. And then comes Ramadan, where you have to abstain from food and drink for 1 month, for a number of hours daily. So it is, again, once you have to make a sacrifice. Another challenge that the youth face here, in my opinion, is the environment. Coming from Pakistan and in those countries, when the month of Ramadan came, the whole environment would change. And you would know that, something is different. And everybody would be excited about the month of Ramadan. There would be a lot of festivities around it. Everyone would be making preparations. But this is something that we lack here, living here in the West. So what we should do is we should strive to make that environment, at least in our families. We should, excite our children. We should let them know that the month of Ramadan is coming. They should know that the month of Ramadan is coming. When they can see their parents making preparations, so on and so forth, everyone waking up at the time of suhoor, offering prayers, taking part in the meal, and then of course at iftar time, everyone gets together and eats.
So I think that something else which is part of fasting and Ramadan is fidya, and fidya is basically for those people who it's a expiation for those people who cannot fast. Some people have permanent illnesses in which maybe they're too old and they cannot fast. They have health issues which are permanent. So for them, they can give fidya. And the amount for fidya is basically giving the amount for them to eat twice a day. So once, every day is twice a day, basically, the amount of food. And also for those people who have temporary illnesses as well. For example, sometimes we get sick and we cannot fast. So for them, they should give fidya, and along with giving fidya, they should complete those fasts in the other days of the year.
And Rizwan Saab, one more thing that I want to talk about is even how non-Muslims, they can get involved with the festivities with fasting.
So we have a campaign in Canada, in the US as well. It's called Fast with a Muslim campaign. And that's basically a campaign in which people, non-Muslims, they can experience what Muslims go through in the month of Ramadan. And it's a good way to bridge that gap between Muslims and non-Muslims and people of other religions. And it teaches them about Islam and the experiences of Islam, and also gets rid of that fear which they have of Islam. You know, nowadays we have this Islamophobia where people are afraid of Islam, they don't understand the teachings of Islam. So this is a good way to bridge that gap and to also teach them about the true teachings of Islam.
And on that note, we have with us on Skype a couple of people who have taken part in this campaign with Fast with a Muslim. This is our first guest, and we'll take some of his insights on what their experience was like. This is a teacher and a coach at Renfrew Collegiate Institute in Renfrew, Ontario. We have with us Mr. Adam Nowak. Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Nowak.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And please tell us about how did you come to know about this campaign?
Well, Renfrew is a pretty small community, so we don't have a lot of diversity. However, a couple of years ago, we had two Muslim students who I got really close to, and I just wanted to learn more. And they started Ramadan and alerted me to this campaign, this Fast with Muslims campaign, and I tried it. So this will be my 4th year starting tomorrow. And it's been just an incredible experience learning more and more about Ramadan and about the Islamic faith.
And how was your family and your friends' reaction when they had heard that you're taking part in this?
Well, they were a little skeptical if I could do it. So they would come and check on me. But what it did, I think, is it allowed me to start conversations with students, with other staff members, with faculty, to maybe ask me why I'm doing it and to learn more about Islam.
And doing it out of, suddenly, this was, I'm sure this was probably the first time that you had ever tried this, and you said you've done this every year since. And in your first experience, did you feel that it was too hard to get through the day, or without water, without anything to drink?
I think water was probably the toughest part. But it got easier through the day, and it gives your mind an opportunity to reflect and to practice self-control and practice sympathy and such. And as the years have gone by, I think it's getting a little bit easier. Well, tomorrow will be another true test.
Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Adam Nowak. Thank you. We also have with us another guest. This is Mr. Cam Stewart from Calgary. He is joining us. He is a retired police officer from Calgary Police Force, and he has also served as a corporate consultant for diversity. He is currently working at the Educational and Diversity Engagement in Alberta. Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Cam Stewart.
Assalamu alaikum. Ramadan Mubarak.
Khair Mubarak. So, Mr. Cam, how did you come to know about this campaign?
Yeah, I've been a friend of the Muslim community for many years. First as a police officer, building relations with the Muslim community, and then just a friend of many Muslims. And I was invited a number of years ago, or a couple of years ago, to participate in the campaign. It was a real honor. I've been to many breaking of the fasts and Eid celebrations, but then some of my friends in the Calgary community asked me to participate in this campaign.
And how was your experience with it? Is this the first time you had ever done something like this?
No, I fasted previously with different Christian religions and with the Mormon community, but this was different, and it was also unique in the fact of breaking fast with community. Which I found was really rewarding, rather than doing a fast by yourself and breaking the fast by yourself.
And since the campaign, when you tried this out, have you been making this a part of your life to try it again and again? If you experienced any health benefits of it?
Well, Yeah, I mean, I have done it. I mean, most recently, I actually did a fast with the Indigenous community, and that was actually a 4-day and 4-night fast. So it was actually a lot more challenging. But I think this really, doing the fast with the my Muslim brothers and sisters, it really helped me get mentally and spiritually and physically prepared for it. I realized the food is not what feeds me. It's my spirituality. Doing the fast with my Muslim friends really helped me in my other relationships with the Creator.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your time, and thank you for sharing your experiences. We hope that it'll motivate others to join the Muslims in fasting as well in this month, in this year's Ramadan.
My pleasure. I hope to do it again with my Muslim friends soon.
Thank you very much. Now, earlier through social media, we asked the viewers, what is your motivation for fasting? And the options that were granted were health, faith, the culture, and even the option of perhaps you're not motivated. We have the results of this poll in now. What is your source of motivation for fasting? 28% are saying that it is health-related, 35% say that it is their faith, and 13% are saying it's because of the culture, and 24% are saying that they're not, unfortunately, motivated to fast. And to clarify, more than 2,300 people, they took part in this poll, Muslims and non-Muslims alike. So we see that only 35% said that they fast due to their faith. This is not, reflective of any single community, but this is a public poll in general that we had taken.
So we can see, from the results, 24% say that they're not motivated, and mainly they're probably Muslims who are they're not motivated. So we have to know it's a challenge. It's not easy to fast in the month of Ramadan because it's quite difficult to do so. So we have to take it as a challenge, and we have to try to understand the teachings behind it, the wisdom behind it. And not only that, but we should try to understand that even if we don't look at the spiritual aspect of it, but even the physical aspects and the psychological aspects are so high that we can fast in that sense as well. And even if we're not Muslim, we can still fast because there are many benefits. Nowadays we find intermittent fasting, which is quite famous amongst the fitness culture. So all these actors, famous people, athletes, they're doing this intermittent fasting, and we find that if they can do it and they find those benefits, those physical benefits, those psychological benefits, then I think as a Muslim we shouldn't have any doubts about fasting in the month of Ramadan.
Jazakumullah. We have a few more comments that people are sharing with us. We asked what helps you control your desires while fasting, and this comment comes from N.A. Chaudhry Sahiba. She says, the prayers of thankfulness and the realization on how lucky we are to have food and drink waiting for us at sunset, while so many people don't know when even their next meal is. And Mazharul Haq Khan Sahib, he comments that Allah Ta'ala himself is the reward for fasting, and this thought helps me control my desires while I'm fasting. We have time now for a few questions that have come from social media. This first question is by Nidai Seher Sahiba. She asked that what are some ways to optimize our energy levels while fasting so that we can balance our daily tasks like housework, studying, etc., and focusing more on our prayers.
So we have to take precautions throughout the day in order to optimize our energy levels. In the morning when we have suhoor, so we should eat such foods that keep us full longer, such as oats, something which is healthy for you, something which digests slowly. And also we shouldn't, sometimes we in suhoor or in iftar we eat fried foods. Mm-hmm. So that's something which is not beneficial. It's something we should avoid. And we should also stay hydrated. In the morning we should have plenty of water as well. And also just overall, we shouldn't try to exert too much energy. We should try to, instead of taking the stairs, we can take the elevator instead.
And you'll find mostly that when you go throughout the month, it does start to become much more easier and it becomes a part of life.
Exactly.
Another question, this is from Sabiha Ashraf Sahiba. She asked that why don't young children have a say in when they want to fast? And she says that in some parts of the world, the kids younger than 7 are forced to fast. What can those who know this is happening do to help prevent it?
I think there's a misconception with regards to the age of fasting. Perhaps people are confusing the age of fasting with the age in which a child should start offering salat. According to the hadith, the Holy Prophet ﷺ has advised that a child should start offering salat from the age of 7, and when the child reaches the age of 10, then he should be regular in offering the 5 daily prayers. Perhaps the confusion is that the age of fasting is also the same as of age of offering salat. This is not right. There's a narration which states that once Hazrat Umar Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu came across a child, and he saw that a child, he seemed very tired, and he was not behaving like a child. He was not running around. He seemed tired and fatigued. And Huzur called him and he asked him that, "Are you fasting?" And the child said, "Yes, I'm fasting." And he told him to go home immediately and tell your parents to feed you. Right? So this shows that the child was very young. He should not have been fasting at that age. In this day and age, the promised Messiah alayhi salam has been sent by Allah the Almighty as Hakam and Adl. In various teachings of Islam, if there are misconceptions or confusions, the promised Messiah ﷺ has come and has removed those misconceptions. And Sayyidina Hazrat Muslim Maud Raziyallahu Anhu gives his own example. He says that when the month of Ramadan came, we would be very excited and we wanted to fast, but the promised Messiah would not allow us to fast. And he said that when I was 12 or 13 years old, that's when the promised Messiah ﷺ allowed me to observe my very first fast. So we should start gradually, and as the years go by, once the child reaches the age of maturity, this is when fasting becomes an obligation. If you make young children fast, then it might have adverse effects on their health, and because of that, they might not be able to fast in the future.
Jazakumullah. And we have some final comments. We asked that does fasting prevent or cure disease? And this comment comes from Asifa Ahmed Saiba. She says that I know of 2 cases of people around me whose diseases were cured by fasting, severe migraines and severe allergies. And she says in both cases, conventional treatments had failed. Only the benefits reaped by fasting helped these individuals to overcome their illnesses. And as this is the last episode of our series, so we've received some very kind comments from some viewers as well. This one comes from Sahibzadi Yasmin Sahiba and Mamoon Malik Sahib. They wrote that Beacon of Truth has been a very inspirational and educational program for all members of the Jamaat. Jazakallah to the presenters, volunteers, and the MTA team for their dedication and tireless efforts to make this a very successful series. Jazakumullah. And Farhana Zafar Saiba comments that I really enjoyed Beacon of Truth. I always looked forward to watching it on Sundays. This is a great show for the youth, especially for those who are struggling with their faith. You guys are doing a great job. I'm sad that this is the last episode for Canada. Jazakallah to all of our viewers and all of those who have sent in their comments and questions. Now, one of the greatest lessons that we are taught in the month of Ramadan is that if we are able to successfully give up things which are not just permissible to us, but in fact necessities of life, it is like a physical representation that we can even sacrifice our life for the sake of those commandments of God. So it makes one reflect as to why then one cannot sacrifice the things that God has forbidden. And so this motivates us to take the necessary steps to become even better Muslims. And let's not forget that we should increase our righteous deeds in this blessed month and complement those with even more sadaqah, with even more charity, just as the Holy Prophet ﷺ used to do. From the MTA team here in Canada, we wish to convey our Ramazan Mubarak to all the viewers around the world. And as this is our final episode for the series, we hope that you enjoyed and benefited from our discussions. Jazakallah for tuning in, sharing your thoughts and questions throughout this series. Please do remember us in your prayers. Jazakallah Sadiq Sahib, Jazakallah Rizwan Muhammad Sahib for a very interesting discussion. Thank you all for tuning in and joining our conversation. Assalamu alaikum and peace be upon you all.
इस्लाम कुछ भी हो जाएंगे हम जहाँ भी के जाना पड़े हमें جائیں گے ہم جہاں بھی کہ جانا پڑے ہمیں